Hey y'all, welcome back to At Work with the Ready. I'm Rodney Evans, and that guy over there is Sam Spurlin.
Hello, Rodney Evans.
Every other week, we are tackling one tough, thought-provoking question from you, our beloved listeners, and sharing a few ideas that might help. So let's dive in. Sam, what do you have for us this week?
All right, this week's question is, I work for a European company that was just acquired by a much larger American one. While we're excited for new opportunities, we both have very distinctive cultures, not just because we're different companies, but because we come from different countries with their own attitudes toward work. Do you have any tips or strategies for this kind of integration?
This is going to be tough. So the first thing to say is that I see too many integrations where the assumption is that the work is financial, operational, and technical. So it's like, do the dollars work the way that we're supposed to? Can we get the workflows sorted enough that the thing is functioning? And does everybody like have the same, email handle and Slack access or whatever?
Right.
And in any integration, but in this one in particular, because of the nuances around region, start from the assumption that the cultural piece is going to be the hardest. One of the reasons that integrations go so poorly is because that isn't baked in to the assumption around the work. And then when cultural norms, whether they are organizational or regional, start to crop up, people are like surprised. And like when timelines get screwed up because all of these assumptions were made that these cultures were just going to somehow naturally and seamlessly integrate together magically, there's a lot of frustration. And then it presents as tension, and it presents as interpersonal conflict, and it presents as this problem that everybody should have seen coming from a mile away. And so my first sort of like no shit but seriously do it recommendation is have the conversation earlier than you think you should about how much work the cultural integration is going to take. And that like
Sure.
you're not going to hack it and do it in 10% of the time. It is going to take conversation and discomfort and negotiation and compromise and winning and losing. And that is going to be more work than any other part of the project. And because that conversation doesn't happen and that kind of slack isn't built in to the project, it either gets rushed or overlooked or done poorly, or it gets done grudgingly and by a bunch of people who are already pissed off.
Yeah. The part I agree with all of that. The part of the question that's kind of stuck in my brain right now is the fact that it's a much larger American one, the much
Yeah.
larger side of things, acquiring a small European company. And I think everything you said is true, and I think there is a reality when you are a much smaller entity being acquired by a much larger one that I don't want to be a pessimist here, but there's like a tempering of expectation that I think should probably happen, which
Totally.
I would then focus into the more micro, into the team that you are now being integrated onto. Can you create more of a can you create an opportunity for some like bicultural integration? Can you
Mhm.
bring some of the very much needed European ethos around work and and what it plays in
Seriously.
our lives? Maybe we take some time off every once in a while. Can you bring some of these more micro things into your immediate ecosystem and not stress too much about your 50-person company's impact on the 10,000-person company who acquired you?
Yeah.
Which I don't know,
I
maybe is too negative, but that's just where my brain is today.
Well, I think what we're both actually pointing to though, Sam, in our different answers is that the biggest problem with integrations is that the realities of them are ignored and
Sure.
then creep up. And like I worked with a really, really big company for several years, and I can't remember what they called M&A, but they didn't have the word acquisition in it. It was like mergers and joint ventures or something
Friendships.
like that.
Okay.
Yeah, mergers and partnerships. Um, and the truth was that the dynamic was exactly what you're saying, which is
Yeah.
this behemoth of a company that was 100 years old or something, gobbled up small companies and then just steamrolled and imposed their exact culture, rules, norms, everything onto these small companies. And there was no exception to that rule. And so, like, there is part of that's like, if that's the deal and it's happening anyway for reasons that are maybe good reasons or maybe stupid reasons, it doesn't really matter. If that's the reality, it's better to just know that than fight against it if that's
Yeah.
sort of the foregone conclusion.
Yeah. I think I appreciate the realism of that answer.
Okay, the other thought that I have
Mhm.
seen this work in companies, is especially where there are regional, cultural differences, spend the money to do some swapsies between
Mm.
teams and do some
Mhm.
expat living. It makes a really big difference. When I was working for an investment bank, I worked for a German investment bank, and at the time that I was there, global mobility was very much in fashion, and it made a huge difference working on these multicultural teams to have sat next to my peers in my role, and truly, like, one from the London office and one from the Frankfurt office sat on either side of me for 18 months, and I
Yeah.
showed up to global meetings very differently because of the relationships and the nuanced understanding that I had of how those people did their work, how like work was done in their countries, et cetera, that you just can't replicate in like smaller, more superficial moments.
Yeah, I love that. All right. That's it for this mini. If you've got a question of your own, hit us up at podcast@theready.com.
And we will see you back next week for a full episode of At Work with the Ready. Thanks for being here.